Today, I'm joined by Damien Peelo, CEO of Treoir, the National Federation of Services for Unmarried Parents and Their Children. Welcome, Damien, and thanks for joining me in this conversation.
Thank you very much, and it's great to be here.
So to begin with, and before we get into your role as CEO of Treoir, could you say a little bit about the other roles that you have or have had in life that have shaped the person that you are today?
Oh yeah, that's a great question, because I think that when you get to my age, all of your experiences kind of continue to shape you as you grow and as you develop as a human being. And I always go back to my family of origin. I think I'm a member of a very large family. I'm the seventh child of 11, and I think that has had a major impact on how I see the world and how the world sees me. And so very much shaped by that family of origin. I'm also somebody who sees myself beyond the work that I do and don't often describe myself. If somebody says, "What do you do?" I don't often think straight away to jump to my working professional role. I think of myself as in my total roles. I'm a father, I'm a husband, I'm somebody who is involved outside of work with my community. I coach kids, I train them in football, soccer, and hurling. I love that aspect. I enjoy that very much, that mentoring and supportive role and that encouragement role. I trained as a community and youth worker, so I see myself in that light very much. So that's how I describe my profession as community work. And I'm a manager. I'm a manager of an organization, and I've managed many organizations over my life. So I see myself in all of those. Those make me up. Those roles and make me who I am.
Okay, thanks, Damien. So a whole range of roles that you and experiences that you're bringing into your current role as CEO. So paint a pen picture and a brief picture of what's been the impact on Treoir of the COVID-19 pandemic, and that'll help to set the scene in terms of what's been the leadership experience and the leadership challenges that you've been facing.
So, well, I suppose very much like every other organization, COVID-19 created huge challenges initially, and continues to do so. And they range from every aspect of not just the service, but thinking of the staff and the health and safety of the staff team and their mental health and well-being. How do you continue to reorganize a service that was office-based into remote working? How do you support and ensure that that service continues to meet the needs of the community that it's set up to meet? There's huge sense of how do you, on the hoof really, how do you do this, very quickly turn around where people come together and interact in an office setting to remote working. That was the biggest challenge in keeping that service and all of the functions, or as much of the functions of that service is going to meet the needs of the community that you're there to support and represent.
And have you moved lots of your services online, or what's been the impact in terms of the way you deliver your services?
Yeah, I suppose we were very much a face-to-face organization that people would come in and access services, for information and support, in terms of the work that we were trying to deliver. There was a national information service which was online or phone service, which was probably the easiest part to work remotely. There was support services for teen parents. There was arranged that was much more interactive and engaging with people in a face-to-face way. So a lot of that work has had to go to work remotely, work online, or work with new COVID restrictive regulations with staff taking a lot more precautions in how they interact with people. But for the most part, people are cocooning away from others, and we've managed to be able to do that. But where we are interacting, we have to then, put in new safety protocols and new standards of face mask wearing, hand washing, social distancing, cleansing and cleaning, things that we had never thought of that we would have to do. So yeah, there's been changes, but for the most part, we've been able to move things online and to people have been able to work at home, just updating the equipment for people to be able to use in a home setting.
Okay. And as you look back on the 7 months, are you seeing any recognizable phases in the way that you and the staff and the organization have responded to the changing context that you're operating within?
Yeah, I would say at the start, of the process, people were, it was something new. And while there was a fearful element around the virus and very uncertainty about what happening, people were very willing to take this new challenge on, and there was no sense of concerns. People were willing to work from home without all of the home office setup and been ready. People were willing to take on that step without without much problems in our case. They did it. The staff embraced it very well. But as it's gone on longer, we've had to rethink, because we never knew. We kept thinking that this might just be a month, 2 months, 3 months. Every month was maybe we get a chance. And as it became very clear that this was going to be an ongoing issue, we then really had to think about. I think we could be doing this quite a long term. So we now need to think about, plan for the future, plan on doing this way, plan on making our services available. Letting people know that we're not going to be back face to face. How are we going to do this? What ways can we work? So there has been a shift in the way that we've thought about that. And then obviously for the health and safety and well-being of staff, we think about, well, how are we? Is everybody okay in the home? Is the home office a proper office? Are we able to work on that? Have we got the resources to put supports and other issues in place? And that was important, because now people were, expected to work from home. Expected to have the same, spaces to work, and the challenges in that were as families, because it's not like in the past where somebody had an office space and said I need to work from home, and they had kids were at school and the kids were, and other family members were at work. Here you suddenly were in a work home space where you were sharing it with other people who were also working or at home. If you had children, the children were there, so we had to rethink the way in which people were able to work from home, and the terms and conditions we had on home working had to shift and change to adapt in the new circumstances. And that wasn't always easy, and that's not always easy, because you have staff, who aren't able to be as available, who can't maybe be on Zoom calls as they would have been available in the office, because they have children around. They're trying to balance childcare and childminding with work. And so you have to think about stretching days out, longer working days that would allow people to work at times maybe in the evening time, and they'd have to prioritize workload. So there was a lot of effort put into what this really means now. And while our service was generally speaking 9 to 5, we had to rethink that, and we had to rethink the weekend possibilities and open it up, that if you couldn't work this week, maybe you could do calls on the weekend, maybe you could make yourselves available at other times, and maybe later in the evening, maybe earlier in the morning. And that began to shift and change the way that we think about the services that we offer. So we're no longer 9 to 5. We have very flexible days that can go into evening times and beyond. If people aren't able to work during the day, perhaps they can do those hours in the evening time. And that's been a big significant impact.
So you've used the phrase there a couple of times, rethink. So you had to rethink a lot of the way you deliver your services, the way you provide, the way staff work, and being sensitive to, on the one hand, delivering the service, but also to the context and the situation that staff are working within. So that's about the organization, it's about the staff, it's about the services you deliver. What's the experience been like for you as the CEO? So if I was inside in your body, thinking your thoughts, feeling your emotions, giving me a sense of what the last 7 months has been like.
You mightn't want to be in that state. How do you function on a day-to-day basis? I suppose, look, learning that I've been kind to yourself, that that we make mistakes, that mistakes are going to be made, that I suppose that we have those doubting voices that come into your head that make things worry you on a day-to-day basis. Is this going well? Are we doing this right? And having to overcome that. I suppose for me, and personally, it was extremely challenging. There was the real sense of how do you ensure that the staff are staying connected? How do you ensure that the quality of the services is staying at the standards that we expect of each other and want of each other, without the day-to-day interactions of the peer-led, I suppose, reviewing of each other or support of each other? If you're working very remotely and you're not seeing people, how do we know that the quality is there? And I suppose the belief and trust in people is huge. So really having to dig deep and accept that people are going to create the right circumstances. People are going to want to deliver and do the best that they can do. And so trying to ensure that we have the best circumstance for that. So, for me, it was about trying to treat people with dignity and respect, and to create those adult relationships between each other that, that we're not there. Because when you're there in an office on a day-to-day basis, even if you don't intend to, there's a natural sense of guidance, of I suppose, supervision that allows the people know, just the people know, and whether they mean to, you don't even expect to create it. People will return from their lunch on time, will do those things. And while they might have seemed important that people were putting in their hours, it became much more important that people were putting in not the hours as much as people were working, but that people were doing their role as best as they could in the circumstances that they had and delivering the service. So that sense of digging deep to realize that we are working in an adult environment with adults, and that people are given the right circumstances to be able to do the job that they can do, and then we will take it from there. And that was important. So trying to find, I suppose, the mechanisms that allowed staff to feel supported without being overly supervised, to feel confident in the way that they were doing the work without, me looking over their shoulder or having to report back to me every day. And because when you're not there in the physical environment, it didn't matter so much that, didn't turn up to work in the appropriate clothing. They could have gone to work in their pajamas for all I cared, and it didn't matter. It didn't matter that people were finishing a bit earlier, getting up and going for their walks, or whatever helped to get you through this, because we were dealing in unprecedented times with a virus that created huge uncertainty for people's own health and well-being. So you had to try and support them in that, and try and ensure them that the organisation and that we were concerned about that, so that the people weren't tied to their desk from 9 o'clock to 5 o'clock. So for me, I suppose that sense of treating people with that dignity, that trying to create that mutual two-way respecting that space, so that we were doing less supervision, but appropriate supervision, if you know what I mean. Less day-to-day guidance, but guidance as it was required and necessitated. And I suppose for what I found was that as we did that, and as people became more and more confident in their own roles, things that probably were creating conflicts within the working environment dissipated. Things that sense of competition for each other dissipated. There wasn't the sense that people had to outdo each other or their colleagues, or that their colleagues were interfering in their roles or whatever else. People grew into those roles in very confident ways that really surprised me, and that I really enjoyed. I thought that was an unexpected advantage for me, that people really grew into their sense of confidence.
I'm curious about that. So say a bit more. So what's happened that there's been a shift within the organization? Because I suspect that lots of leaders are always trying to create that.
Yeah.
That's what they want, but often don't experience it. And then in the middle of the most unprecedented times, with lots of complexity and mess and rapid response, this stuff emerges. What's your sense as to why?
Well, it's a number of factors. Some of it was accidental. Some of it I just have to accept. I had no part to play in it. And others, you can hope that you had some influence on trying to guide that kind of emergence of that responsibility. So some of it was the learning that I was getting and doing as a manager anyway. That idea that that I'm not responsible for all issues that emerge, and that people can deal with their own interpersonal stuff. When you're there and present every day, and people have problems and people emerge with things, you get sucked in and drawn into some of those issues, and you feel that you're responsible to resolve them. And the very nature of people being in a building together can throw up issues that conflicts that people have. By the sheer fact that we were separated, that people had very clear sense of their roles and responsibilities, very clear sense of what they were in charge of, gave them the space to develop them in new ways without the day-to-day interference of other things. And that was really surprising. That was really interesting to see that develop and emerge. And as people became more and more confident about what they were doing and in the roles they did, that support. Now, some of that's to do with the fact that we had, before the COVID, we had newer staff that were coming on and interacting with older staff. So you had a mixture of people, and they were trying to figure out their roles. And as COVID, I suppose, allowed that to, in their own time and own space, figure that out in other ways. Obviously, not in support with me, but they figured it out, I think, and grew into them roles. That might have happened anyway, because they're there longer and they would have got that anyway. But I think COVID and the space that created for them, the sense that they knew they had specific work to do and they could get on with it, allowed them to develop that. So, and I think for me on a personal level, realizing and growing into that, like, nobody loves conflicts, but I never had an issue in confronting it or engaging with it or trying to, not let the conflicts take hold and power of an organization. So naming them very quickly, trying to address them. And I think by the very, very nature of, and that could be just small interpersonal conflicts and other things, but they can lend to cultures within organizations that are unhealthy and other things. And I think by the very fact that people were working on remotely, by the very fact that we were away from each other, we needed each other in other ways, and needed each other when we came together in our Zoom calls and in our team contacts. We needed each other in new ways. And I think mutual respect emerged that I was striving for, that I was hoping to build in a team, that mutual respect would be there. But it grew very quickly when we weren't in the spaces together, that we were hearing each other in new ways. And I think that allowed that to flourish. And that to me is the biggest significant thing, is that the respect for each other has thrived. Not saying it wasn't there before, but with all the other complications that come into working in its closed space, in an office space, it thrived when we weren't there in that space. So yeah, I think.
So if I was to encounter you as a leader a year ago, October 2019, and now, how are you different as a result of the experiences of the last 7 months?
I've learned a lot. I suppose for me, I feel a lot less needing to control everything, because a lot of things are out of my control, and that has helped me, not worry about, those other things like timesheets, and they're still done and they're still collected.
Yeah.
They're done in a very different way now, and that sense that, look, let's focus on what we're trying to deliver, and are we getting there, and what helps us deliver those things? What can we do differently? That's been a really interesting development, because we were forced into it quicker than I would have thought I'd have got there. So
yeah,
by having to do it remotely, I've had to let go and shed a lot of the things that I thought were the management style of things. So and it can drive some aspects of some of the team crazy a bit, because they have responsibility for aspects of recording the information on timesheet, sick leave, and all those other things, the administration side of things. But there's been a loosening up of that sort of overly governance kind of space to allow people to flourish and to grow into that role.
So if that's been one of your learnings, is that sense of letting go of letting go of an expectation you had about the need for control. Is that
yes. What that I felt was a core part of that role of management, and or how I had read that role of management in terms of what was important.
What's replaced that then? So if you've let go of the need for control, what's replaced it? What's come in its place?
That sense of trust in each other, that sense of building a kind of a more of those. And I'm not saying it's all there yet, Kieran, in any way. That we're still working towards this, but that sense of we're in this together. My role is different from yours, but my role isn't about an authoritative role. It's about trying to build a better environment that this team can work and deliver, and think of new opportunities to create new ways of working, and deliver to the best of our abilities to deliver what we're expected to deliver. We have. So I suppose it's not that it replaced it. I suppose the other parts of it. So as one is diminished, the other one has risen, and the diminishing piece is that the more governance, supervisory role to allow the individuals to thrive and trust in their abilities, and then collectively to bring that individuality together as a team, and how does that impact on what are we doing? So people, I feel, are feeling more confident in their role, more able to engage in that in other things, and not feel threatened if somebody raises queries or questions or asks them about their role. That people are because they see the outputs that they're doing, they can see the work that they're doing is contributing to it, contributing to the overall organizational piece. So for me, the clarity that was been able to give to each person as they go away into their home bubble to work. This is the expectations that we have of you. These are, now everybody had work plans, everybody was doing that before, but there was something different about going away on your own and working on these areas without the day-to-day interactions in the office, and something about that created people the space to really develop into that thinking. And if they got overworked, they were able to reach out to their colleagues. They didn't feel they weren't as good as each other, or that they weren't as respected. They were able to ask that on a peer level, on a par with their colleagues. That to me was important. And
so that shift from that letting go of some level of control, and developing more of a culture of trust, that's a shift that's taken place for you. Anything else that has shifted in you?
Yeah, I mean, look, one of the most significant things, I suppose, is a reality check for me about where we were going in terms of pre-COVID. We were plowing along, working away, giving it all, trying to think about, how our work connects into the broader society. And suddenly we were hit and everything kind of slowed down and stopped. Now, work still went on at a pace, but other than that, things slowed down. The daily commute, the race into work, the race home, the disengagement between, the way we had siloed family life, work life, other life, that's all just merged into one kind of different space, and it's created I think, a more unique overview that balances that much. Potentially, we can balance that much better. So for me personally, that sense of being able to look at things differently, that we are part of a family, that we are part of our broader society, the impact that work and society is having on the wider environmental issues, on the wider societal issues. I think it's created a better understanding of how we were impacting on that. So the massive drop in carbon emissions when people stayed at home, the fact that we weren't using cars. So beyond our day-to-day work and services, we began to see the impact that our lives were having on much wider societal basis, on the environment. We kind of knew it was happening, we were being told, but we actually began to see the impact when we stopped doing what we were doing and did things differently. And that has fundamentally shifted. I don't think we'll ever go back to what we were. I don't think my biggest worry is that we'll just rush back to what we were doing, but I don't think we will. I think people have learned enough, the staff have learned enough, the boards and management have learned enough that something uniquely wonderful has come out of this crisis. And if we can harness that and capture that, we could probably do something a lot differently. We could fundamentally change the way that we work as a society, and fundamentally change the way that we are protecting our planet and others, and thinking about.
So say a bit more of what are the, so there's, I use the phrase of an unimagined possibility, that in each situation there is something that's unimaginable, and somehow or other we happen across it or we sense it. So say a little bit more about what possibility you're seeing.
Well,
and for yourself in terms of your leadership role as much as the organization.
Yeah.
Maybe start with yourself actually in terms of your leadership role. What's the?
Well, what I think I have to do, or what I would like to see myself doing, is spending some time trying to capture this, exactly what we're doing now. Is really trying to articulate it in a more meaningful way about what actually has happened, what has actually taken place, that it, be it accidental or others, and even talking to you today now is creating some thoughts in my head around what led to some of that changes, and has those changes been really good? They're not all really good. There's not always, there's not, but the really positive things that have come out of it. What really worked there, and can we replicate that going forward? Can we work on that? So can we extract that from what's happening and see, well, that was a good thing. Was that just COVID related, or is that something that would work in other circumstances? So, in the management styles, I've learned a lot about maybe how you approach that, how I understand that people are different to each other, that we're all not the same, and we all don't respond to the same stimuluses, and we don't all respond in the same way. But what we all can do is, we feel that we have a role, a valued role, we can flourish in that role if we can get the right supports and circumstances. So that's significant for me. How do you do that? And that takes work, because one size, as these catchphrases doesn't fit all. So we know that, but then really when you're trying to implement that takes a lot of work, because that means you have to do things differently. You have to get to know your colleagues well. You have to get to understand what helps them work. So working from home for some people has been amazing. For others, they've struggled. They found it really difficult. They've missed daily interaction. So they need a different approach. They need something different. They need a different way to engage. And if you really want to, keep your teams together, and you want to help everybody, support people in that regard. So I've learned about my own management styles. What works for some people doesn't work for others, and how we need to adapt that. And more broadly, the practical things like, the clocking. No, we didn't clock in. We hadn't got a clock in, but the timesheets, the 9 to 5 kind of idea, the way in which we set up services, responded to, sometimes in some ways, to the needs of who did that really help? We thought it was that was a time that the people that we were supporting, the families that we were working with, that suited their needs. But really it doesn't. That doesn't always. It's nice that they know that if I ring at that, I'll get you there. But they have crises and other things at different times, and a need for services at other times. And so, can we be flexible in the way that we approach our service? Can we be flexible in a way that we expect people to travel to work? If we are an organization that thinks bigger than our own little day-to-day job and thinks about our impact on the broader society, what are we contributing to environmental policies? Like before COVID, I was asked by the board to consider, how do we as an organization be more eco-friendly? So thinking about recycled paper, thinking about how we dispose of our waste, the green and the brown and the others. How do we do that we're not contributing to, the problems of pollution? But that's the tip of the iceberg. That potential was, well, let's rethink that. How can we stop our carbon emissions? How can we prevent our footprint while still delivering services? Can we move to a better way of delivering, moving out of an office space fully, and engaging people, and maybe meeting in different ways that we don't always need to meet every day, but we might meet less often, face to face, so maybe thinking about all of that creates new possibilities for how we work and how our work impacts on the broader society.
Right. So there's lots of, using the phrase again, rethink. So lots of rethinking about the way you structure your work day, your work week, the delivery services, and then your role within wider society. In terms of your role then as leading all of that, I'm curious about what have been the most challenging aspects. You talked earlier on, maybe sometimes the negative voices. So it's my experience is that when you're working through lots of complexity and change and possibility and everything, it's quite challenging. So I'm curious, let's say, so my question is, what were some of the most challenging experiences for you? And I'm curious as to why they were challenging for you.
Yeah. I suppose, having to engage with staff in a different way, in a more humane and friendly way, and it's not that I wasn't engaging with them or didn't think I was, but actually been forced to think about the importance of that interaction, and we're not in a space together.
And what was the challenge for you in that, Damien? I'm curious.
Well, I was very much prepared to, and happy that staff used to break during the daytime for coffee and have a chat. It wasn't official time, it was something that people used to do. I rarely joined in. I rarely went to join into that space because I was busy and I was doing other things and it was their space and it was, I rarely joined in. Now I do. We have a coffee break on a Wednesday and we all come online and we have our coffee break. And it's been wonderful. It's been, for me, one of the best things about COVID that's happened. I've got to know the staff in ways that I wouldn't have got to know them. Now, and I used to meet them, we used to have lunch, things together. But this ongoing interaction, the challenge for me was to get off to stop hiding in my office really and come out and interact and engage. And to try to make that and participate in that in a way that was as an equal, not as their manager, but as a fun and equal way. And so to talk about anything other than work really was the key goal. And it was much more comfortable to talk about work, and it's much more comfortable, especially for me and for others maybe to interact with me in that way. And I'm also the only male in an all-female office. So that was a real challenge, for me to engage in that space in a way that I felt was, that one, that I didn't dominate it, two, that I wouldn't be left, but that I wouldn't try to, or that I didn't, or mansplain things to people or try but just to try and create a safe environment for people to have fun and to talk about work, if they wanted to, films, movies, what they watch, day-to-day stuff, some of it, and the interaction when you find yourself in those spaces, it changes the interaction, of course, because maybe when I'm not there, they talk about other things that are more related to them and as colleagues and as team members. So, but that was a challenge for me, and to be able to directly interact with people on a Zoom call, it's not easy. You don't know where to be looking, but how, and if people have their cameras down the wrong way, to encourage them to pop up and sit up, and so you constantly, trying to, and if you're watching people not engaging, you're facilitating that space to try and bring people, draw people in. Because the team meetings then, which we do as well on a weekly basis, they are much more official based, and and some parts of that people don't interact with well, and you're trying to draw in and you're trying to manage, and learning how to facilitate via Zoom is a whole new skill. It's a whole new other possibility. So, but for me, I'm really thinking about that personal. And I mentioned hiding in my office. Now I didn't see it that way. I was working. But I did take the decision, the active choice, not to go down for the coffee breaks when they were having coffee. Often I would just say I'm too busy, but often try and leave them have a space. But now that uncomfortableness of having to come into that space, I think has paid dividends, and I think for the staff and people have said.
And what would you say is the dividend for you? So what I'm hearing you say is that you're showing up differently with your staff.
Yes, I'm showing up differently. They've seen me in a much more human way. And they learned more about me, and I've learned more about them. And I think that has really, really created a better environment and a better atmosphere. And that the trust that I talked about earlier, that's begun to build up in a new and different way. Because that for me was important. That sense of people knowing that who we all are, and that we, and I still don't know some of the staff. I still don't know, and that's fine, and that people have to keep their personal ways themselves, but I think it helps when people know a little bit more about you, and a little bit of what makes you tick outside of work and in those environments, and so it allows for people to be more forgiving of mistakes that we make of each other. It allows for people to be more human towards each other. So yeah, I think it's been it's a small thing, but I think it's paid dividends to just that team cohesion.
Okay, I'd like to shift the focus forward. So when you look to the future, what don't you know about the future?
Oh, lots of things. Don't know anything about the future, but I don't know. We just literally do not know what's going to happen. I suppose the things that worry me or concern me in work-wise is that there's been a massive financial cost on the state for COVID-19, and we're an organisation that is primarily funded by state contracts we get from the state to deliver services. I have no doubt as this emerges and the billions and billions in debt that we are in, and the money that we borrowed, there is going to be a time when we have to look at cutting back on certain things. And I think the worry is that, people's livelihoods may go in the way that people have the work that we have been able to offer for over 40 years as an organization some of it may cease because of funding restrictions. And that's a concern. So um, that's something that I think I can't know. We're trying to figure it out. We're trying to look and read the circumstances. We're trying to create contingency plans and plan A, and have different types of possible solutions and risk assess those. What happens if this goes? What can we do if that goes? What's the likely outcome? And some of those scenarios, there's no possible outcome that looks good, except maybe making sure that staff are kept are supported well in whatever transitions that may occur in that regard. But my sense is, even though Treoir has been around for 40 years, most people in this sector realise that jobs are dependent on funding, and that we don't generate our own funding, and even if we can, with the circumstances. So there's a sense that people would be, just as long as they're dealt with fairly and supported, I think people would be understanding of that issue.
So a real sense of uncertainty as to what the future holds around the financial sustainability organization. So in 5 years' time, as you look back on 2020, what are the things you'd like to be able to say about your leadership?
Oh, good one.
If you had to choose 3 things, you say, yeah, in 2020, I kind of really nailed it in these things.
Yeah, I suppose that we were effective, that I was effective in being able to transition from an office space to an online and remote working space fairly quickly and well. And we did it well, and we engaged with the staff in a way that we were compassionate and understanding of people's needs. So effective and compassionate would be that there are things that I wouldn't have, the compassion was important, that sense of being compassionate and understanding that this is a scary time for people and not everybody thinks the same way, and everybody needs something different in to be able to continue to work. That would be important, that we nailed that we got that right, that we kept people engaged and active and staying with us throughout this process. And I suppose looking back in 5 years' time, that the learning, the things that you've just talked to me today about, that learning, we captured it and we utilized it to the best of our ability and advantages to create a better working environment, whether that's remotely in-house, whatever it might be, that we use it, and that we use it in a way that we can say we never returned to the way it was before. Not that the way it was all bad, but we've used it to return to be better than what we had. We've created a better society structure for working in society by the basis of that. So we've created a better work-life balance. So if I can look back in 5 years' time and say we nailed that, we just didn't see this out and survive it. We actually learned from it, and we've created a better working environment. Then I would really feel that was really good leadership. That was really useful.
And so my final question then is, what sustains you in your role, and what will sustain you as you in the weeks and the months ahead as the future unfolds and that level of uncertainty continues? So what sustains and what will continue to sustain you?
Well, I suppose, and this goes back to the very questions at the very start that you asked about who, the roles I play and who am I, what makes you. I suppose what sustains me in life and is the people that I saw and looked up to, and how they saw their sense of themselves and their role in life and their responsibility. So the sense of responsibility and the belief that what we do makes a difference, and if done well, can be a very positive impact on people's lives, and in turn help improve the society that we live in. So what sustains me is trying to strive. And I know that sounds grandiose and fluffy maybe, but what really does, it's the belief that we have one chance in our life. This place that we are inhabiting we're going to be here for a very short time, and so what are we doing to try and make that time as best as we can for all the people that live here, that we are connected in ways that we didn't understand. And I think that even the virus has shown us that the virus has started in one part of the world, quickly spread across the world, that we are connected in ways that we are one group of peoples. We are on this little blue globe together, and we really have to try and look at how we make a difference and improve our life me, that's it. This is all it is. So that's sustainability. And I think we need to be thinking about each other, and how we share this space and how we coexist in this world together. What helps improves our lives. We need to be focusing on what helps improve that, and doing less of what hinders that. And if we can move towards that, some of those things are very structural issues. Some are caused by society, the racism, the poverty levels, and some are interpersonal issues, and some we can control directly ourselves, and some we have to work harder to try and overturn society. So what sustainability is the belief that we can actually move to a better place, that the things that we do on a daily basis not only impacts me and my family, but others in this society. So, from simple things that we do, from our direct responsibility. So what sustainability is belief that what I'm doing is can make a difference, and if we do it well, will make a difference.
Okay. Damien, thank you very much for joining me in this leadership conversation, and thanks for showing up in a way that you were very honest to share your learnings and what the experience has been like. So thank you very much for joining me today.
Thank you.